Donna Renan,
And I'm Christina Brown.
and you are listening to Two Moms and a Couch. And this morning, we are talking about changing mindset while juggling kids. This is something Christina and I talked about quite a bit when we first met, and something that I think um, if you've ever tried to do anything, one of the primary things that making change requires is changing your mindset. Any guru or anyone else you listen to or talk to always talks about changing your mindset and changing the automatic thought process that happens for you when something comes up. And that could be around anything, whether it's money or relationships, food, if you're trying to lose weight, being calmer with your kids, interacting with anyone in the general public, anything at work. All of that requires some sort of change in the way you're thinking. And while that in and of itself can be extremely challenging, I think when you add kids and family responsibilities and all the stuff that comes with can make it even more difficult to do and to juggle. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that, both the idea of changing mindset and also doing it while juggling all these other responsibilities.
Yeah. So definitely I think, mindset is everything, right? Like mindset kind
Yeah.
of determines whether or not you achieve something or if you don't achieve it. And I definitely realized this. I've always heard it, and honestly, like I've always just been like, yeah, whatever, it's not that important. Like anytime it would come up in a book, because I mean it does. It sounds like super corny. Um
Yeah. Well,
or
and
like
it
like
sounds like
so
there's no
hoaxy.
definitive path to how do you
Yeah.
change your
There's
mindset? It's
no
not like you
there's
can
no
flip a switch
meat.
in your brain.
Exactly. It's like what are you talking about? Like mindset. It's just this, theoretical thing. But I definitely realized the like how true this is. A few years ago, like when my mindset got like really messed up and like it wasn't in the place that it used to be. So I realized the importance of mindset, but then I also realized the importance of who we surround ourselves with and who
Mm,
we let have access to our energy and the thoughts that we have about ourselves and our lives and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, like I think it's really important. It's something that's super hard to change if we don't innately like already have like a growth oriented mindset. And I think that's a really important distinction too, right? It's what is the mindset that we do want to have? It's they talk about the difference between like a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Well, somebody who has a fixed mindset is more inclined to stay stuck or think that they're stuck or not have options or believe that they can't make something happen. Whereas somebody with a growth mindset is somebody who's going to look for opportunities and see obstacles as challenges, but,
right.
able to overcome them. So I think that that's the distinction as well. How do we allow ourselves to start to develop that growth mindset if we don't have it already, while also juggling the kiddos.
Yeah.
Um, I don't and this is after like going through the experience that I went through. Um, and I think you've mentioned it like a couple of times before, Hannah, like when we are surrounded by some challenging folks and we don't have the support, um it is that much harder to change mindset.
Oh,
If we
100%.
don't, yeah, like if we don't have the people around us that have the right mindset. It's possible.
Right.
But it is
It's
just
just more of
it
an
takes
uphill
more
battle.
energy. Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
and
it's
here's what I'll say is, even before you get to like changing the energy around you and like the people you interact with, I think as a parent, not even as a mom, just as a parent, like if you're an involved parent at all, there are so many things that we do from like sun up to sundown, like from doing the whole getting them up. And as parents, as moms, I know you do this, I do this, you get up like an hour to two, sometimes 3 hours earlier than the rest of your family to prepare for the day, like take care of stuff that you need to do for yourself and like get everything ready for the families for the day. And then like you do the whole routine of getting the kids, and then you're on, especially if you're with your kids, like you're homeschooling, your son's with you all the time, so like you're on with your kid and or your family for the whole day, and then you do the whole bedtime routine, and by the time you like fall into bed at whatever time, there's so little bandwidth. And like, you know, everyone in the corporate world says capacity, which I hate that word, but it perfectly describes, like, there is, for a lot of women and for a lot of parents, there's very little left at the end of sort of running this marathon of a day
Yeah.
to focus on anything, much less think about your mindset. Like all you're doing is like trying to get a couple minutes to yourself before you pass out for the
Yeah.
evening. And so
Mhm.
and so like I think, you know, one of the things that is really hard is finding pockets of time, even if it's like 30 seconds in a day, to start actually thinking about, hey, how am I reacting to the situation? Am I getting like super angry about something? Am I getting really negative about something? Like when somebody tells what, like when my kid comes to me and says, hey, like I need XYZ. Am I only seeing problems, or am I also looking at like, hey, what's the solution? Because if you don't know where you are, there's no way to fix it. Like there's nothing to fix until you know exactly where you, or at least the general vicinity of where you are.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I agree. Like that first step is just like recognizing that, maybe some changes need to be made, with your mindset, or like that you just have a desire like to change your mindset. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's not like, you realize you have to, but it's you want to because you want to change the results in your life. I think that that's really important too. Just looking around and saying, well, at the end of the day, like when I am, tired and like just spent
Yeah.
from like all of the things, like am I happy though? Because we can be spent and we can be exhausted, but still be like, wow, that was a good day, and I feel good, like I'm happy. Is that how you feel? Because I know like for myself, like personally, I go, all day, like from
Yeah.
3:45 in the morning until, about 10 o'clock at night. Um, and sometimes, I do like, let myself stay up until like maybe closer to midnight to watch something or like
Yeah.
continue working on something or whatever. But, and there are several times like throughout the day that I'm just like, wow, like I've done so much already for the day. Like, wow, like, I mean, it still just keeps going. But, I kind of always, like, pay attention to what I say, like, after that. Like, I'm like, if I say, like, "Oh my gosh, like, I like, this has been just such a busy day, like, I'm tired, I just want a break," then I know I need to check myself and, like, maybe give myself a break. But if I'm saying, like, "Oh my gosh, like, this has been such a jam-packed day, but gosh, I'm so happy. Can't wait for
Yeah.
tomorrow." Then, I know that I'm coming from, I'm in the right place. I'm moving in the right direction. Even if there's a lot going on, even if it's hard, I know that the results that I'm creating in the present is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm spending my
Yeah.
time on the things that I'm supposed to be spending my time on. So
So
I
let's,
think, that's a big part of it too. It's like just like, are you feeling good with where your time is going and where you're at right now?
well, so
If
let's
not,
talk about that, because
yeah,
I think there's a, when you talk about mindset, like you said, it's sort of fuzzy. There's no clear sort of definition, and there's multiple different like avenues you can talk about when you talk about mindset. There's, as you talked about, like growth mindset and fixed mindset. The reality is like your mindset is just how you think about the world and about everything that's happening around you. Like that's the very basic definition. And mindset can be positive, mindset can be negative, and mindset could be neutral. And like when you think about like the development, how humans grow, we naturally change our mindset like every day, can be like, there most people don't just like sit in one negative mindset. Like they change the way they think about things as events in their life unfold and as things happen. So like somebody who's not a parent is going to have a very different mindset around raising children and like what that looks like than somebody who actually has kids, right? So let's focus on like a few different types of mindset, because I think it's a wide range. I think most parents, I know for me, like until I started actually thinking about it actively, like most people don't sit down at the end of the day and go, hey, that was a great day, I'm so happy, or like any, they just don't think about it. Like I would just fall into bed and go to sleep. There was no like thought process involved. And I
Yeah,
think
I
when
think
that
that's
happens,
probably a mistake.
well, a hundred
Just being
percent.
honest.
And no, 100%. But I think that's where like most people end up feeling like they're on this like treadmill and like every day's on repeat, right? Even if you're
Yeah.
doing like slightly different things, when you're not mindful and thinking about like what you're doing, whether it's like whether you've set any kind of goals for yourself or for your family, and whether each day is the accumulation towards that goal, like a step in the journey versus just another day that you've sort of survived, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that if we're talking about something like mindset, especially changing mindset, then, you know, developing this self-awareness, this self-reflection and introspection like is a must. Like you're not
Yeah.
going to be able to improve your mindset if you're not doing that. Um I honestly like I would argue that you can't really live a fulfilled and happy life if you're not in tuned with yourself and, paying attention to how your days are going and where you're at. And that I mean, that's honestly just for me, it's something that I naturally like do. But I know that that's not the experience for everyone else. But, if we're talking about mindset, that's really the first step. It's learning how to check in with yourself and, you can keep a journal to track things like that, like, track your mood, your productivity, your energy, like those three things, and just give it a
Mm-hmm.
rating, a happy face, a meh face, or a sad face, like if it wasn't so good for
Yeah.
each of them. That's more than enough. And then at the end of a month, you have a good amount of data to see, like, well, what's the trends? Like, am I
Yeah.
pretty meh like throughout the month, or do I have more happy days, or do I have more just not feeling it days. And,
Mm-hmm.
then you have an opportunity to, and then if you journal along with it and just take some notes about what you did during the day, then you can kind of go back and, see, well, what happened on the days that I was feeling more, meh, or what happened on the days that, didn't go so well, and what happened on the days that did go well.
I actually really
Um,
like that. I like the idea of happy face, like, trying to identify your emotions around a particular thing. Um,
yeah.
so like to give example, so I in June I joined Noom. Like I signed up for it because I'm trying to lose like whatever 10 pounds. And I've always been like I know myself enough to know that I'm one of those people that needs like a third party to help me with certain things.
Yeah.
Some people are really good at doing things like completely independently, and they don't need someone checking in or like helping hold them accountable. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah. That's
But I know
we
myself well and
all, yeah,
but I
that's
know
it.
myself
Yep.
well enough to know that that's what I happen to need.
And that's okay.
And that's perfectly okay. That's
Completely
just the way
okay.
I'm made.
Exactly.
And so I signed up for this app that uses psychology to like help you lose weight. And it's not just psychology, but you also track your weight and like your calorie intake. But one of the things that they do, because the app was built by psychologists or people who have a background in psychology, is when they track your weight every day you have to weigh in, and then they give you like this box where you pick your emotion, like like a smile, like a yellow face of emotions that you have to like assign to that weigh-in.
Mhm.
And I had never really thought about like I really should go back and see like what that, because I'm like 2 months in or whatever, like what that, because I've been tracking every day what that looks like in terms of like the face, the emotion attached to this
Yeah.
process.
Well, I mean, I think that's what makes us so special as human beings is the fact that we do have emotions, right? We're
Right.
sentient creatures. But I mean, we can be super reactive with those emotions, or we can recognize that, emotions are just data. It's
Mm-hmm.
they exist because they are trying to communicate with us threats or, good things in our environment, mostly threats because that's just how our primitive brains are
Yes.
set up, right? But there's no such thing in my opinion as a good emotion or a bad one. It's all just data. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that, a lot of people will think like, well, if I'm angry or if I'm sad, like those are negative emotions. Nope. All emotions are completely neutral. It's
Interesting.
the connotation that we put to it that makes them positive or negative. But anger is just as important as feeling joy. Because
Mm.
if we're, angry, that gives us some clues that there are probably some things that we need to change
Yeah.
in our lives, right? If we're feeling joy, then that's really important because that's telling us, well, maybe we need more of that, or we just need to maintain that thing and make sure that it stays present within our lives. If we're feeling sadness, well, it means that, we're human and, we can experience a full range of emotion, but it's also about like, well, where do we where are we feeling the sadness and why,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's being able to dig in and understand, well, this is the experience, like this is, you know based on the sensory stuff that's coming into me, this is what's going on in my brain, and this is the emotion that I'm feeling as a result of it.
Yeah.
But what is that emotion telling me to do? And then you've got to, be the person who chooses what to do with that. um and I think that, emotion and mindset, can go hand in hand. um but like going back to like what you were saying before, kind of like defining like some of these different like areas of emotion, or mindset, I think. So mindset, yes, like set of beliefs or, thought processes and connotations that we have like about the world around us. But if we're talking about like a mindset for success or a mindset to allow us to live a life that we actually enjoy or something like that, then I definitely think that developing that growth mindset is, kind of the way to go there.
A hundred
Um,
percent.
or like if we just want and I'm all about like I think that we should all live, very satisfied and fulfilled lives. Like I'm not interested in myself or honestly folks that are just okay with being okay. Like I want it to be like, yeah, like I'm living the hell out of my life. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whatever that means for different people.
Right.
And I feel like if we're not there, we need to figure out why. Like are we just accepting, the things that are going on without around us and not willing to put in the effort to make some changes? Because I think that could be mindset too, like not being willing to
Yeah.
put in the effort or not thinking that we can put in the effort or and make changes in our lives to actually make it more what we want it to be.
Right. Well, and that's why I talked about the difference between like types of mindset because
Hmm.
absolutely growth mindset, when you talk about that, a lot of people say that, that can mean something different for various people, but it's exactly like it's a broad overview of your life and whether you want to be growing
Hmm.
and moving towards something better, whatever that better is for you, or if you've reached your version of better, like continuing to make your days and
Maintain
your
it.
life as great as it can be. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, not I shouldn't say but is a contradictory word.
I s- that's
I,
also something in the self-help world that I disagree with, but is just a word. But anywho.
um, what I will say is that I think there's different levels of mindset. So like if you're talking to somebody who, let's say if somebody listening in has never thought about this ever,
Hmm.
like just they've been on this, treadmill of life, just trying to get from one day to the next and haven't had the luxury, the ability, or the focus to be able to even think about this. Like when I was a coach, I wouldn't start out somebody with, oh, let's talk about growth mindset. What I talk about is, hey, like when something happens to you, what do you see first? Do you see positive or negative? Like,
Yeah,
what's
but
your outlook on your life? Like,
yeah. I agree with that. Like when I sit down and I, work with folks, for me it's not so much about classifying positive or negative though.
Hmm.
Um because like honestly, I try to throw those things out the window.
Mm.
Because again, like
Well, yeah,
there is
why?
no positive or negative, not really. Things are just going to happen and we can assign stories to it as much as we want to, but there are facts and then there are, what we make about it.
Right. Well,
So
but when I say positive or negative, like you can choose to view an event as like an impediment, or you can choose to view it as a learning opportunity. And the
I
way you
agree.
choose to look at something, and I say, I mean, those are essentially positive and negative per person. Like everyone's going to have their own version of what's positive and negative. And
I
when you do
agree.
that, it changes, like there's psychological studies that about how it changes somebody's just like internal like ecosystem depending on how they view particular events, and it changes how they can move forward, right?
Yeah, I agree. In terms of we can choose how we respond to something, but I still try to stay away from like, well, you're being negative about a situation or you're being positive. Sometimes something sucks. And it's okay to just say like, gosh, this sucks. You're not being negative if you're saying it sucks. You're just being honest about how you feel. And I
Right.
think that having that emotional honesty like is really important. I think that like if we're talking about mindset and, making some tweaks in life, I think it's really impossible to make those changes if we're not emotionally honest first. I think that when it comes to mindset, like we have this ability to kind of self gaslight ourselves into believing that things are okay. Okay, I just have to change the way I'm thinking about it. No, it's okay that, my partner doesn't make me feel good. But guess what? My feelings are my own. So I just have to change the way that I'm thinking about my partner and then everything will be okay. No, that's called self-gaslighting, right? It's not just about
Hmm.
changing the thoughts, it's about really understanding what those emotions are telling us, whether they're positive or negative, and seeing what change do we have to make as a result of that. A lot of times it's going to be having a conversation. And whether it's a conversation with ourselves or if it's a conversation with an external person. But I think when we try, and this is one of the challenges that I have with self help with where it's at today, right? I
Hmm.
think a lot of times if we try to just change, what we're thinking instead of actually digging into understanding, well, what's the information here? What's the information for me? Um, we're kind of just immediately telling ourselves that our instinct or what we're feeling, our emotion is wrong, and I don't think that's true. I think that our emotion is one of the like first places that we can get real-time information about the experience that we're genuinely having in our environment. It is how we choose to respond to that emotion and what we do after, but I want us to be able to take that information in and then decide, well, what do I need to do next? Because this can then have like really positive effects on our life by like just being like more honest and like in tune with what's actually going on.
So I fully agree that, honesty with yourself is super important. I don't I don't think so. When I say like thinking about something as positive or negative, I'm not suggesting that you now have to ignore every negative emotion and try to like find the positive in it and, put on blinders to what's happening around you and pretend like somehow you're okay with things. I don't think that's the intention. I think the intention is to be able to more easily identify what's truly like causing you, like what doesn't fit within your own personal values for your life versus like an automatic response,
Yeah,
because
and
I think that's what most people struggle with. I know that's certainly something that I struggled with for a very long time, where like if your mindset is what I'm going to call negative mindset, you will automatically look at the negative in everything around you, no matter how great it is. Like you will go to Disneyland with your kids and complain only about the lines and the heat. Like they're
Yeah,
just, it's just the things that you focus on. That you, there might be legitimate, there are lines in heat, but you're focusing on something that doesn't actually bring you value, or doesn't help you identify whether that's something that's a positive, like that's going to further your life or like provide any kind of value.
yeah. So I completely agree with that. I think for me the difference though is like instead of saying positive versus negative, I say, well, are you growth oriented or are you fixed?
Mm.
You know, and I do think that those are like the real distinctions, right? Because if we are growth oriented, we're not going to sweat the small stuff. You know,
Mm.
we're not gonna pay attention to, something like the heat. We're gonna pay attention to, "Okay, I'm here having a good time. The reason that I'm, like, here in the heat and staying in this line is because I want to go on this ride with my family and have an
Right.
amazing time." That's a growth mindset. But if we are, like, in a line and, you know, it is hot and it's taking longer than we expect and we're gonna sit here and complain, like, well, we have a very fixed mindset because we're not looking at the bigger picture
Mm.
and you know what the actual objective is that we are here to accomplish.
Got it.
So I think you know it's kind of a similar thing. I just kind of stay away from you know positive or negative or like the like labeling
Why?
folks as that because we're not that like we sometimes we're going to go through seasons of life where it is easier to see um the opportunity. And then sometimes we're gonna go through seasons of life where we are gonna have a harder time seeing the opportunity, whether it's because we're going through some challenges or whether it's because we have, you know, grief and things like that going on. We're all like fluid. Kind of like you said at the beginning of this, like we're dynamic, like we're gonna shift and change. I
Mm-hmm.
think that if you're somebody who has a growth mindset, you have the ability to shift and change. Sometimes you're gonna, you know, respond to something and see the opportunity, but sometimes you can still have your bad days.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all okay. Like there's no such thing as perfection. Even if you have a growth mindset, you're still gonna have your bad days and you know respond to something quote unquote negatively. And that's absolutely okay. And even if you have
Right.
a fixed mindset, there might be some areas in your life, like maybe like with work or something like that, where it's easier for you to see opportunities and solutions. But when it
Mm.
comes to like your you know, interactions with your partner or with your children, like maybe it's just a little bit more frustrating. And it's not necessarily because you like like hate your spouse or your children or anything like that, but maybe it's because you haven't recognized that there are the transferable skills you can take from how you operate in your work and bring that into these other areas of your life to function a little bit, you know, a little bit better, right?
Right.
So it's not like, I don't know, in my opinion, it's not just about, like, seeing, you know, like, positive or negative, and it's not like this blanket, like, over life in general. It's recognizing that we are all so multifaceted, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, is this response, like, you know, given the situation, is it consistent across the board, or is this, like, a more
Sure.
drastic response, like, for this, you know, particular person? But, you know, I also think that toxic positivity is absolutely a thing.
Okay.
Everybody
I have
is
not heard
saying,
that term.
"Oh, yeah," it's you know, everybody is saying, like, you know, be positive," and, like, people are confused, I think, on, like, what positivity actually mean. Positivity is optimism, you know,
Yeah,
optimism or
hope for
being
better, for something better.
yeah, like, yeah, it's being able to see, you know, opportunity, like, even in the face of a challenge, right? Or being able to
Mm-hmm.
see the silver lining. But at the same time, like, if you're super duper optimistic, you can be extremely insensitive to other people. You know, you can lack
Yeah.
empathy towards other people. And I think that when we focus just on the positive, the positive, the positive, like, we're seeing a lot more of this lack of empathy and basic compassion like for other people and the situations that we're going through.
Mm.
So that's I just try to shy away from that. And I like to recognize like, hey, like just tell me who you are. Just tell me like you know, I want to know what your natural patterns are. And yes, your thought processes too, but I want to know what your patterns are. I want to understand why you feel that way. why that's hard for you. And then, okay, let's work on actually overcoming that. Let's work on you having that feeling or that response to thinking something, sucks. And then figuring out, well, how can I say this sucks, but I'm doing it because of X, Y, Z, and C. And that's why, but's
Right.
not a bad word, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Well,
okay, to say, this is happening. This is what my experience is, but I'm going to choose this. And I feel like that's where the real power is.
yeah. No, fair enough. It's
Oh, I can't hear you no more. Oh, there you
uh-oh.
are.
Can you hear me now?
No, I can hear you.
um,
Mm,
okay, fair enough. So, like, we've talked about sort of the idea of mindset and different types of mindset and how you identify it. I think if you're like a parent and you're juggling all of this, first step is like, how do I even start thinking about this? And I know, like, we've talked a lot about knowing yourself and like taking time to figure out like what your thought patterns are, what works for you. I will say, and I'm just going to throw this out there, like part of knowing yourself is knowing whether you can do this independently or whether you need help. Is a really big part of it. And I know, like, I've used coaches before. Like there are life coaches, there are mindset coaches, like there are people who do this as part of their work and they try to like help guide you along. um, that's something I needed when I was getting started in like changing and like identifying and like addressing my mindset. That was not something that I could do completely independently. Um, it sounds like you have been able to like do this independently. So why don't you talk about some of the tips and tools and like tricks, if any, that you sort of use to even get the process started? Um,
yeah, no, well, like I said, I've always been pretty fortunate. Like my mindset has always been a growth one. Like
okay.
that's just how I've always perceived the world, even as a child. Um, but like I said, like I kind of felt or experienced like just how important mindset is a few years ago, like when mine did get bad, right? Or not bad, but like it did get less
Fixed.
growth oriented. Um yeah. And it was because of the people that I was spending more time with,
Okay.
and allowing myself, and I'm not gonna actually blame the people. I think that we can, blame, whatever, but any change starts with like just radical self-accountability, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's because I chose to allow myself to play in the realm of the folks that were around me, and choose to believe that I was incorrect about my own life.
Mm.
Um, and that made me play a lot smaller, right? And show up a lot differently and develop all this self-doubt and blah 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 blah, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in order to get out of that, like first, I think even before saying like, okay, well, I want to, work on my mindset, well, there has to be that identification that you want to work on it. But you
Yeah.
also have to know why. Like, what's the point?
Yeah, and it's usually
What's
for most people it's spurned by some desire to make a change of some kind,
mhm.
right? Like they
Yeah,
look
but
around their
what's
life and they go, "Hey, like I'm trying to lose weight or I need to make more money or like I need to move into a different area or something's going on with my kids and I got to figure out how to like be there for
yeah.
them."
But, I would say why, you know what I mean? Okay, well, I need to make a change. Why? Because I need to make more money. Why? Because I don't have any savings. Why? Like, why is saving money important to you? Asking
Mhm.
why like at least 5 times, because if it's just something super basic, if it's like, okay, well, I need to make more money, that's not often enough of a motivator. But I would say like, well, why? Like, why is it now that you want to like make this change? What's happening? Like in really getting crystal clear on what's going on in your life and what you think or feel or know that changing your mindset is going to shift for you
Yeah.
in your life and your circumstances, because it's hard, like having a growth mindset isn't easy. Like even as somebody who naturally like has one, it's not easy to always maintain it. And I think that
Especially
that's
when you're not,
something.
there are like growth mindset is not, I'm going to say you're not going to find a ton of people around you that are
Right.
that way. So it's not
Exactly.
like you're going to, like your next door neighbor is going to be on board with you.
Right. So and that's been my experience growing up. Like it's always been
Yeah.
really challenging to find peers that also think the same way that I do. So
Hmm.
what you do is you start internalizing and you think, well, there's something wrong with me.
Right.
When there's not anything wrong with anybody. It's just different mindsets, right?
Right.
Um, but that's it's not easy to maintain, and like I think that that's something that people also kind of get wrong about this, is that people, like I touched on earlier, with a growth mindset don't have bad days, don't have emotions, they don't have challenges or obstacles. I've experienced that so much in my life, where people will just like assume because I choose to have like a little bit more of a mature response, or like keep my emotions in check about things, that my life is easy, and definitely it's not. I would argue that if you have a growth mindset and you are effectively like maintaining that, you're showing up in that essence like in the world, you're
Hmm.
probably putting in a lot more hard work on a day-to-day basis than
Yeah.
somebody who is choosing not to do that.
Right.
So you have to be willing to sign up for that hard work, and you have to have a big enough reason to do it, um in order to keep you motivated, because it's not easy to do so.
Yeah.
And then, you do have to kind of do that inventory of the folks around you. There are different levels of people in our lives, and there are different reasons that people come into our lives. Like some are just supposed to be there for a season, and some are there for, a lifetime and stuff like
Right.
that, right? So I think you have to do that inventory of the people that have access to you and that you've been allowing to influence you.
Right.
And I think it is like taking that radical self accountability. It's not about blaming those people. They just are people. They are who they are. But it's
But
saying,
it just
well,
doesn't
I
suit,
want to
it wouldn't
choose.
suit you.
Yeah. And it's saying, well, I want to choose a different reality for myself. And it's not, there is nothing wrong with those, people. It's not saying like I'm, better than those people, but it's saying I want better for myself.
Right. And
Right.
that can take multiple like routes, right? Like if you
Yeah.
have really close friends that you spend time with on a regular basis and they're constantly interacting in a way that's not, positive or growth mindset or whatever term you assign to it. Like if you want to maintain those relationships, start having this conversation. Start talking to them about mindset. That's going to give you some really quick clues on whether they are people that are also open to changing and like willing to make the work or not. And if they're not, that might mean start limiting the time you spend with them.
Yeah. And
Because you can't force people to change around you. Like you can only impact, as you said, Christina, you can only change how you react to situations.
exactly. And so along with like the radical self accountability, like, I completely agree with that. Like it also comes like radical acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
If people are not also growing, or
It
willing
doesn't mean
to
they
grow,
can't.
it doesn't mean they can't, but if they're choosing not to, like you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
I think that that's something that I've always kind of struggled with, honestly, is wanting to always help people
Mm.
or coach people, even people that really didn't want the coaching, because I could see their potential, and
Yeah.
because I knew the power. But that's something that I did learn, like these past few, like these years ago, when things change, is like, okay, well, yeah, I'm done doing that, because
Mm-hmm.
either you are, coaching these people, and like maybe they're having these, small, realizations, but their whole world hasn't shifted, so they can have this like realization but then go back to doing the same thing like the very next day.
Right.
Or you end up picking up their slack.
Right,
And you
which
think,
creates a burden on you when you're trying to
right,
make changes for yourself. And
yeah,
there's
and you
different
think
people,
that's making improvement, but it really isn't. And then when you step back and you really think about it, you realize like, well, you're carrying this load for them.
right,
It's not actually that you guys are growing together, it's that you're growing and also pulling them along.
right. And
Um,
you know, that actually feeds into, and I know we're getting close to having to like um end our session, but that sort of feeds back to we did a podcast a few episodes ago talking about making friends as a parent, as a mom. And the reality is that like if your growth mindset, if your mindset is a growth mindset, you're going to have to become comfortable with not having that many friends. Unfortunately,
100%. And
it's
that,
just the reality
yeah,
of life because you know this common saying that you are the sum of the five or I've heard 5 or 7 people around like closest to you. If you have let's exclude kids and like partner, right? Because those are the people around you. But
I wouldn't exclude partner though. Kids, you can't control who your kids are, but you absolutely do have control over who you choose as a partner.
100%. But I'm saying
And
like at this point, if you're listening to this podcast at this point, you've already chosen your partner. So like let's put that aside because we're not advocating like you know separation or anything like that. But
yeah, but you
that's
can
a
have a
separate.
conversation for
You
sure.
can 100%.
We can
And
talk about that in a in
we'll
another
talk about that
episode.
in a different session. But when you're talking about like your outside friends, the people around you, if they're not growth mindset and they're not interested in changing or growing or like it's just different people have different interests. If that's not something they're looking at or interested in, then you're going to have a really hard time making any kind of change for yourself if you continue to spend time with these people.
Yeah, and
That's just
well,
the
you can.
reality.
And I think you can make changes, like for yourself. Like it's more challenging. But I think you can make changes for yourself, but you also have to be mindful of the reactions of the people around you, when you do start making those changes. And those reactions could be, you know, to kind of tear you down a little bit more because they become uncomfortable with the fact that you are changing and growing for the better.
Right.
And
Well,
they're
and
not
they may
doing the
not
same
say
for
it's growing for
themselves.
the better, right? Like that,
Well,
and that's the whole point. It
well,
is for
exactly.
you.
Yeah, they're gonna, they're gonna take their discomfort out on you because they're not gonna recognize the fact that they're threatened or intimidated by your growth, right?
Mhm.
Like that happens. And again, I think that that's where like we have an opportunity for, compassion and like empathy,
Mhm.
to recognize again, these are not bad people. They're not, it's not because they hate me, and it's also not because I'm bad or doing anything wrong. It's
We've
just
grown apart.
because, yeah, like, and that's, completely like okay.
Yeah,
And if it's somebody like you really care about, then, like you said earlier, it's limiting that amount of time like to that person. But I mean, I think you've got to be willing and able to say like, well, this is what I'm doing for myself. This is what I like. If you have an issue with it,
yeah.
I mean, that's just not my problem. And like just
Well,
getting like pretty strong like to that point to say like, this is mine. Whatever you've got going on is yours. We can still relate on this and this. And that's that. Like, this is my boundary. This is where, and like, that's the thing, it's like, it's boundaries, right? Like, this is where I start
we'll have to talk
and
about that in
end.
another session.
Yeah, but and it's also just like having that strong sense of self. It's like, well, this is where I start and end, and this is where you start and end. I feel like there's always been like so much enmeshment, like
Blending.
amongst people, like whether it's like with friends or whether it's a partner or whether it's like with children. Like, but I think knowing like, this is mine, like this is my container. What I've got going on isn't going to harm you. Like,
Right.
that's okay, and
Well, and I will say like we'll talk about it in the next session because it's almost 6:30, but um there are people for whom that like you changing wouldn't be a problem because they have their own like boundaries and awareness. And then there are
Yeah.
those for whom it becomes a threat because they do not.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And you've got to be able to recognize like when that's what's coming up. Like when people are coming
yeah.
at you because you are making those changes, you have to be able to recognize like, listen, I get it. Like this person is uncomfortable with this. It doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means that my growth makes them uncomfortable. That's
Hmm.
it. And that's okay, but I'm going to keep on growing and take my space as I need it and, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, that was a really good discussion. I definitely think we will continue it. We certainly have more to say about it. And I think next time we should talk about boundaries because that certainly came up and it's something that's going to continue to come up on all these topics. So thank you everyone for listening. Again, you're listening to Two Moms and a Couch. This is Hannah Renan.
And I'm Christina Brown.
And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.